back in those days, we were looking at, the segmentation of the cable audience, and Roger Williams, who's here, produces What's My Car Worth, was really the COO at Speed Vision and the brains behind the financing and distribution. But we did very early on start getting, emails and handwritten letters from people saying, my husband won't come out of the basement. or really good. I went to the living room this morning and he dragged the TV to the garage. So, yeah, we were feeling pretty good about that.
Now, one of the things that Roger Werner, who founded Speed Vision, found early on was a lot of people like what they watch on TV, they choose, but not many of them are as passionate as race fans. And so in the early days of ESPN, they used Formula One as a wedge to help get them into the cable companies, because not a lot of people would call and wear out their cable companies saying you need to add this channel. So kudos to all of you for carrying that torch for all of us so that we all have jobs. My mom thanks Bobby Aiken all the time. She says my son is virtually unemployable, but you somehow keep him employed. So thanks for that. I think it's fair to start with the godfather of car TV, Barry. You've been doing this for 18 years. When you started, did you ever envision it going this long?
Well, I had no idea, of course. We did 4 one-hour specials for Speed Channel, Speed Vision back in the day. And they asked us to continue on, but go down to half-hour segments, because half-hour segments they could run more often. They were replacing 2 segments. Most were 30-minute shows, and we were bumping off 2 shows for our one show. So they said to go down to 30-minute shows. We were kind of offended by that, but we did it. And now they're running us, back in the day when they didn't have any content, they're running us 23, 24 times a week. That was pretty good at all hours of the day. And when Fox stepped in and bought out Roger, we figured it was all over. The car guys had gone, but the Fox people came to us and said, you're actually one of our higher rated shows and we'd like you to be on year round. And we were real excited about that until about an hour after the meeting got thinking, I've got a business to run and we're gonna make a TV show every week for year round. So we went back and they said, no, you make 26 shows. We'll show 1 week of first runs and then the second week of reruns. And we did that for a lot of years, 26 shows. We are not a cookie cutter show. We don't sit in the studio. We travel 9 guys and we go on location and we usually stay there for 2 or 3 days. So it's quite a deal. To do that 26 times is a lot. So the last few years we've been doing 13 shows. Still a lot for me, but that's why you see a lot more reruns of Car Crazy now, because 13 shows is a lot for us at this point in time. But no, I had no idea. 18 years, go figure. I mean, it's gone like that, and we've had so much fun, and I guess that's why it's gone fast.
Well, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's clear you enjoy what you do. I think maybe you didn't know it was going to turn into this. I think you probably knew you would never run out of material, because this is such a great
We have
space.
so many places wanting us to come. We have years and years of material ahead of us, all kinds of places to go to. So there's no end to the car hobby. It's a big hobby and it's growing now, and very exciting.
Now, put you on the spot a little bit. Of all the shows you've done, is there one that was a personal favorite for you, and then maybe one that, based on response, that was a personal favorite with fans?
Oh, wow. I guess Evert Lauman, the Lauman Museum in Holland. If you haven't been there, it should be on your bucket list, regardless of what kind of a car guy you are. It's Smithsonian Museum quality. You walk in the lobby is probably a football field of length and 200 feet high, and that's the lobby. He has hundreds of millions of dollars. It could be $1 billion. I don't know. It's just mammoth, and it is done as well as it can be. And most importantly, Evert Lauman is the most passionate car guy I've ever met. And to walk around with him in that museum and talk personally about every car really thrilled me. So that's a great one. You can see it on YouTube if you went to the Lauman Museum. Most responded one, is about my watch. It wasn't where we were, but I did letters at the end of the show a few years back for a number of years, and a guy wrote in and he said, why don't you look like a car guy, get rid of that tie. Back in the day, I wore a tie during the show. We wore ties going to work back in those days, go figure. It's got a little more casual now, but I wore a tie and I had this watch. He said, get rid of that Rolex watch and look like you actually get your hands dirty. And so I said to the camera, I said, okay, I'll take off. It's my dad's watch. I never even thought about it being a problem, but that's the problem. So I took it off, set it aside, I said, okay, no more watch. Okay, I just want to talk about passion, the passion of the car hobby. And About 5 minutes after it aired, and this goes back like 13, 14 years ago, about 5 minutes after it aired, he emailed me back and he said, "I'm so sorry I said that to you. Put that watch back. I had no idea the nostalgia." And I cannot go to a car show today after all these years. I was at Autorama last week in Detroit. I had 3 different people come up and say, "I want to see your dad's watch." And then they got all emotional, telling me what an idiot that guy was for telling me. I said, no, he was sorry too, you know. So I guess I would have to say that was the most responsive, the fact that it just happens all over the years. It speaks to really the heart of the car hobby. I think the nostalgia and the appreciation we have for legacies, whether they be cars or watches or what have you.
Well, I owe you a belated thanks for helping kind of get my start. My dad made a deal with all of boys in my family. I'm one of 4 boys, and he said, "However much money you have when you turn 16, I will match it for your first car." And so when I heard that, I went to town. I took every job. I mowed my grandmother's lawn in her apartment building. I worked for this food company, doing these cheese wreaths and footballs and all this stuff, jams and jellies. But this one guy came and detailed my mom's 6.9 Mercedes, and when I heard what this guy charged, I'm like, wow, that is the business I want to get into. And so I sat there and I was like 13, I just wore that guy. Why are you doing that? What are you using there? And all the products were MEGUIAR'S, H7, etc. And so I wrote all that stuff down, and I went into business, and I had $2,600 when I turned 16. There was a 68 Camaro with a big block that I had my eye on. I went marching right up to that guy's door. The problem was I'd never seen it up close, and it was a total roach, and so I never bought the car. You touched on the passion that obviously unites all of us. One of the things I love about Ray Evernham's show is he really kind of taps into that. And I'm going to ask you, what is AMERICARNA, and why do you think these pieces of machinery, invoke so much emotion?
Well, yesterday in that in the seminar, the guys brought up the intelligence versus emotion in design, and that's what AMERICARNA is, because all of us in the room know that when it comes to cars, our emotion way overrides our intelligence, right? It's just, we just love cars, and I've loved cars my whole life, and throughout my racing career, traveling around the country, I've met so many incredible people with just unbelievable stories, and they are so emotional about their cars. And as much as people talk about electronics and everything, I don't know anyone who's ever named their iPhone, okay? But people name their cars, and they keep cars for generation after generation. And the more I dug down into the history, there's no single machine ever created that's had a bigger effect on the American culture, the way we live our lives, than the automobile. And it's so diverse, it crosses so many boundaries, and that single emotion about a machine and its effect on our country, to me, is just an amazing story. And when you talk to someone about a car, they immediately change. It's like they're talking about a member of their family. They've got a great story, a great memory. We talk about when you were younger, a lot of the cars were backdrops for your pictures, for whether it's graduations or proms or Easter, and I don't think that we've ever lost that. And the car is so personal. Even now today, it's different. It's a lot maybe about function, and some of our younger people, we want to bring back that emotion, but it still really is about style. It's about being personal. It's about freedom, and hearing those stories and traveling around the country like we do, it's just amazing. The phone's starting to ring. Hey, did you meet this person? Did you meet this person? You got this story, and it doesn't have to be a really fancy car or a really fancy story. There's just some great emotional connections to the automobile. So that's why I love doing the show. And I think we called it AMERICARNA because we just couldn't come up with a better name, I thought.
Well, it's memorable and stands out, and I think it suits it perfectly. So.
But we are still, one of the cars that we have not been able to find, though, if anybody knows where I could get one, we're looking for a 73 Oldsmobile with a big chicken head mounted to the top of it. If anybody knows where I can find a car like that, no.
The ultimate free-range chicken? Well, the thing I'm best known for, perhaps, my chicken car. He's kind of moved on to a different level. He moved to he lives at the Fairmont Hotel in Santa Monica now. He's been there 4 years, rent-free, VIP. And so when I book him for a commercial now and again, and I got in this one negotiation with Target, and they were really hanging on the price. I said, listen, I said, you got about an hour. I said, because I can suggest he show up, but I can only suggest. I'm just kind of the caretaker. And he's like, are you really talking about this car? And I said, I am. I said, in an hour, it's $5,000. And so he called back and says, they're in. I said, all right. Speak the freedom you talked about. I will never forget the feeling when I drove out of my driveway for the first time with my driver's license, with no one riding right seat, in a 73 El Camino, and just that feeling where I could, it was like an etch-a-sketch. I could create whatever I wanted. Some of which I got in trouble for, but it worked out. So one of the things that I think is it's become, not all the cars are barn finds now, but it's become this thing. So the next three guys who make their living looking for buying and selling cars, and so having an eye, but everyone is fascinated with the barn find. And I know that's a broad description, so I want to ask each of you in order, or in whatever order, what your biggest one was, and also what's your biggest maybe disappointment, where you thought you were going for something and then it turned out to be a bit of a mirage. So I'll start with you.
I'm going to answer both of those questions, and I don't have 18 years of experience. I have 18 shows of experience, but I did have a chicken El Dorado one time. They got it. It was great. But to answer your question, I think probably in the mid-'80s, there was an old Harley-Davidson dealer not far from me in a little town called Energy, Illinois, and I had been after him only one time, and he kind of backed off, and sometime later he called me up and invited me up to his place. And I was a 30-some-year-old kid, anxious to go see his stash, and we stood in front of his Harley shop for a half hour and small talk, and I was just chomping at the bit to go see what was in the barn. And when he turned and walked the other direction, I was so disappointed, but what he did is he took me to his first motorcycle shop, which was about a block down the road, and it was a two-story edifice. It was kind of crumbling, and a little small door, a short door like me. And we opened that door, and the cold of winter was in there. It was an absolute tomb. There was 50 old motorcycles and posters and pictures and stuff all over the floor. And George Swim and I got to be good friends. He sold me that stuff at such a reasonable price, I almost cried. The next day when I went back, George said, as we were rolling the bikes out, I think I want to keep that one. And I didn't say a word. I just put it in a pile. At the end of the day, there was 7 bikes in the pile. And we rolled them back in his building, and I had my lion's share of machines. And several years later, George was in my place, and his wife said, "Oh, George, there's the car you always wanted." And I had an old 55 T-Bird. And I said, "Hey, George, I'll trade you that car for the rest of those bikes." And he said, "Sure thing." Well, the happy part of the story is on December 31st of this year, George Swim and his wife are still alive. He turned 100 years old, ex-Harley dealer, World War II vet, and just a champion of a man. That's probably my best pick.
That you thought you were onto something and it turned out to be a phantom?
Well, that happens occasionally. Most recently, I had a lead on a 1934 Packard V12, and my fiance and I drove all the way up to New Richmond, Wisconsin. Got that, guys? New Richmond, Wisconsin. And we found the car. We were unable to see the car, but we did hear the story. And it was a gruesome story of a gentleman who had passed away and left it to his children, who had this 15-year fight over who gets the car. So more money was spent in legal fees than anything else. The gentleman who owned the car wasn't there, but his wife was, and she sat with us for probably an hour and told us this incredibly long story. And the last thing she said was, "What my husband told me is when I die, sell that car the next day so our children don't fight over that car." And I think that's a great lesson for everybody who has and owns things, and what do we do with these things that we're caretakers of. Try to make some planning and try to avoid the conflict.
And call Dale if you want to.
Now call me, right?
No, don't call Dale, call me.
Well, let me see it
Hey,
first.
Bob, I think here's a show. Competitive car chasing.
Battle of the barn boys.
Gladiator style, chariots, I like it. Peter?
It's probably a pretty recent car. I got a call from a guy in California, and he said that a buddy down the road had a 427 Cobra that he's owned since 1972. So I called the guy up, and he said, yeah, I want to sell the car. And I didn't tell him who we are or what we do. He said, I'm interested in the car. And he was really leery of meeting, so he said, drive to this town, I'll meet the side of the road downtown. So I jump on a plane, go to California, drive to this town, waiting at the side of the road. This Cobra pulls up, and the guy right away recognizes me and says, hey, you're the guy from TV. And we start talking, and I know instantly I'm gonna buy this car. It's a great car. And as we talk a little bit more, he's hedging, he's backing up, and he says, I can't sell you the car. And I'm thinking, wow, I just flew to California, met this guy at the side of the road, and now he's not selling me the car. And my first instinct is to be pissed off. So I thought, you know what, the guy's a real gearhead. He's owned this car from '72. You can see him get all emotional about the car. He just couldn't come to parting with it. So he said, let me buy you lunch, I'll make it up to you. So we go out for lunch, and he buys me lunch, and he's telling me the story about in 1972, he had a 289 Cobra, he wanted a 427, and he traded his 289 for this 427, and he was gonna now sell the car to put his son through university. And he was all emotional. His wife had passed away a few years ago, and that's why he was gonna do it, and he said, I just can't sell the car, I'll figure out how to do it somewhere else. So that night we went out to a cruise night in California. We went out for dinner. We really hit it off. I was still kind of ticked off. There was some money on the table in this car. And at the end of the night, he said, I had a deal done with the guy that I'd sold my 289 to, or swapped my 289 to in the 70s. Here's his phone number. He wants to sell the car. So I drove out to Vermont. I talked to him. I drove out to Vermont. This car had been sitting in the barn since 1972. Since the 427 guy had traded cars with him. We did a deal, he owned a little short track out in Vermont. We did a deal that afternoon, and I just sold the car at Scottsdale at Gooding. That was the Barn Find Cobra.
Control your emotions. Good lesson there. Wayne?
Probably the Bugatti barn find that we had on the show was probably one of the better ones. And then the Cobra, Peter's talking about Cobras, but this guy calls me and he says, I've got this Cobra that's in my barn. And so you picture something in your mind, this dilapidated barn, and there's this Cobra. We get to the guy's place and it's an estate. And the barn is something, it's unbelievable, slate roof and copper downspouts and things, And we open it up. It's an old carriage shed, and it's on a fox hunting farm. And there in the barn is this Cobra, and it's all dusty and it's covered with plastic. And I questioned the guy. I said, "Why is it so dusty?" He says, "Oh, we covered it with plastic when we knew you were coming." For what? I don't get that. So, and that turned out to be a really great episode where we picked up a young man at Children's Hospital in Hartford and gave him a ride in the Cobra, and everybody sort of comments on that one as being a really cool episode. Just recently, we had I got a call from this guy, and he says, my father-in-law's got this Allard J2X he's owned since 1960, and my ears really perked up because I've been looking for an Allard J2X for a long time. He says, I think he's ready to sell it. So the crew and I get on the plane, I call him and I say, could I film your car? And he says, absolutely, come on down. So we spend the whole day with this guy, and we look at the car and we go out for a ride, and everything seems to be going good. And so now it's like 3 in the afternoon, and I say, so how much is it? And he says, oh, it's not for sale. I go, what? What do you mean it's not for sale? He says, who told you it was for sale? And I look right at his son, and I didn't want to throw the guy under the bus, so I said, would you consider putting me on your list? He says, there's at least 30 people on that list. He says, I don't know if you're going to make it. By the time we left, I was on the top 5 people. And he called me 2 weeks later. He says, you know, I really like you. He says, I'm going to sell you the car. But here's the deal. I'm going to tell you one price. There's no negotiation. And he told me the price when I bought the car. So that's a pretty cool story. You know, you get to a place and you're all excited to buy this car, and then it's not for sale. So that stuff does happen.
Wow. Actually, I'm going to come back to you guys, the car traders, if you will. But Bob, how many pitches do you get a month on new car shows? And you said you talked about the philosophy and it's kind of character-driven, it's the people, but you know, some car guys and race car drivers were a little bit like cats, so herding cats, and then you just turn us loose. The show, whether it looks like it or not, has to have a structure, and there's real kind of formula to what hooks people. And you know, the good shows, you watch the first 30 seconds, you're watching the whole show. So how do you sort of take an idea and walk it through to something that lives?
Well, we get a couple of hundred pitches a month, literally, and probably 80% of them are the same pitch, which is, I'm Willie B, and I'm the biggest, baddest builder in town, blah, 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 tattooed all up. And then they go to, and the shop is run by Helen, who's really smart and beautiful and everything else, and yeah, so it's really great. And then there's the village idiot, I don't really know much, but and then there's the dog. And then there's the guy that really runs stuff, who really is a wrench, and he can do this stuff. And then there's a couple of other misfits, and it's the same pitch.
That sounds like 80% of the shows.
There you go. So, Wayne's World.
Wayne's World.
So 99 of them get thrown out.
Yeah, and it's you know, it's really, it's two things. It's personality based. Again, it's that filter. Would you have a beer with these people? The other thing is there a skill set that they've got that's really, because everybody here has got a skill set that makes it really respected experts. And you know, and the third thing is, does it differentiate a little bit? So we've got a new one coming that's going to launch right out of Barrett-Jackson down in Palm Beach. That's a father-son team out of Maryland, believe it or not, who run an auto recycling business. We call it Junkyard Empire. But they're a great relationship. The son's kind of taken over from the dad, but they're still in this. The son has got an incredible collection of cars, all stuff that he's restored out of stuff that's come through the yard, and he buys anything. So it's a lot of it's transactional and value, you know, kind of valuation stuff, and how does he part stuff out? If he spends 25 grand on a cement mixer, he ends up with 65 grand when he parts it out. And it's a good thing, and they've got an Asian guy who answers the parts phone, who you have to subtitle him. And it's like a chapter in itself, because it's like, you want alternator or radiator? What do you mean you can't understand? You want alternator or radiator? So that's a pretty bad joke. But you know, again, the ones that really have some granular kind of connection stand out pretty quickly from all the other stuff. You know, and the contrived conflict of arguments and screaming and the ticking clock is stuff that we've never gone in for. We just think it's total fabrication. And that, you know, that's by design, because out of respect for our audience, we know the audience really wants to know, like a peek behind the curtain. What really goes on? What's the process? What do they know? How much is it worth? What's it going to cost? What's it going to pay off? So those are the things we look for.
And the contrived confrontation in racing, it's contrived getting